All right, now I decide I don't want the radius and the hand. I want to have some independence on being able to control them. So I'm going to go to my bones here, and I'm going to take the radius and the hand. And I'm going to go under skin, and I'm going to say unbind skin. Now they just moved a little bit. Okay, they went back to the point where they were prior to their attachment to or their control by any of these joints. So in a way that's actually better because now I'm probably having a little more accurate. They kind of were pulled by that other joint. So this is what I'm going to do then. I'm going to create three joints. So I'm going to go to my skeleton, create joints, and I'm going to click. I need to show my polygons here because I want to do this in the front window again. Again, I want to kind of be actually out on the surface of the capitulum, then down to the distal, and then one more joint on the wrist. Okay, hit return to tell I'm done. Now we'll go to our perspective window to see. Now the joints right now are a little big, so I can go under display, animation display, and go to joint size and just scale that down a little smaller so they're not quite so big. But I still might want to move this one back just a little bit. Okay, and then I'll get the one for the distal, move it forward. And I'm trying to use only the arrow, one arrow at a time, not one axis motion at a time or movement at a time. Okay, so now I've got everything in the way I want. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that top joint and the radius here, and I'm going to go under skin. I'm going to say bind skin. Remember, we still have the selected joints. And I'm going to do the same thing with the hand. So I'm going to need my outliner for my hand because it has a bunch of parts. And then I'll get the I should have labeled these the joints here on the wrist, and again say apply. So I'm going to, while I'm here, I'm going to name that wrist. I'm going to name this distal radius. Radius. Okay, so theoretically if I grab the wrist and rotate it, the hand will rotate. Now here's the problem. See where it's rotating? It's rotating the middle of the carpal bone, so it's really not a good spot. So I got to take the hand, detach it, take the radius, detach it, unbind skin. I'm going to take the distal radius here and move it up just a little bit, and then take the wrist and move it up so it's right in that joint socket. Now I'll get the hand while I have that selected. Oh shucks. Wrist, hand, apply, radius, joint, radius, surface, apply. Now let's see if the wrist does any better. Yeah, okay. So not great, but it's not bad. I could probably look to put that even further back. Let's try it one more time. First I want to make sure I go undo it. Hand, skin, unbind skin, take that joint and move it back posterior so it's in there more. Now I'll get the hand, bind it again. Now let's see. Yeah, okay, that seems a little better. Okay, all right. Now, we could make a constraint to take care of that wrist rotation so that we're not trying to get into that joint again, right? So we'll do the same thing we did before. We say create nerve primitive circle. We'll move the circle over here so it doesn't confuse it. Rotate it. So we're not confusing it with the circle we made for the whole arm. I'm going to get the control vertices and I'm going to select these 4, scale them so they make kind of a compass thing, and to make it easier to see from the side I'm also going to move them so I have a shape like that. Okay, now do the same thing we did before. I'll take that, hold the letter V, try to get it V for a point, try to get it up there to that point. Let's hide the polygons for a second so we can really make sure we have it right on that wrist joint. V, middle mouse select, now it's snapped it to the middle. Okay, now I'm going to actually move the thing out, hold down the D and the V and see if I can, see if I can D and V, see if I can snap onto that right back. So the pivot point now is on that wrist joint. Let's put the polygons back on or make them more visible again. So I'm going to delete the history for this thing. I'm going to freeze its transformations. Okay, I'm going to pick the constraint first, and then I need my outliner here, and I'm going to pick the, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one, the joint right here. Okay, so I got the constraint, command joint, going to constraint. Now this time I'm going to say orient, and the reason I'm saying orient is orient lets me rotate. I can't move, but I can rotate. So whoa, Nelly. So my orient constraint should let me rotate that, and if I wanted to I could use the same thing we did before, maybe make some restrictions in the attribute editor for that, so that I can pretty aggressively flex and extend it, but not, I can pivot a little bit, but not too much. So let's make that hand or wrist constraint so we know what it is. So that's constraining essentially the hand at the carpal bones. Okay, so now we have that. One last thing I want to do, I actually really would like obviously this radius and the hand to move when I move the rest of the arm. So I'm going to take the radius, which is controlling this radius set of joints, the radius, the distal radius, and the wrist. And the radius is the top joint in that hierarchy. I'm going to middle mouse drag it on top of trochlear notch. Now notice it's now indented underneath there. So that means it's a child of that. So theoretically, when I get the control for the trochlear notch and I move it, I move my hand. If I want to rotate the wrist, I can still, even though I'm maintaining the offset. Okay. I can take my notch. That's a translation. No, I'm sorry, my notch. Yeah. Okay. I don't need my notch. I'm sorry, I need my controller, my arm constraint. Set that to 0. And then take the wrist and take its rotation 0. Okay. I forget to get, I got this, oh no, okay. There we go. All right. You know, I'm not sure I remember to zero out that constraint before I made it the orient constraint, that shape. 0. And there's a way I can break that constraint without having to delete it and start all over again. I think if I go through something called hypergraph, and I tell it to go find that and tell it to show me its connections. See where it says wrist constraint? So there's the wrist constraint, that's the nerve. That's the actual constraint node, so I just deleted it. So now the wrist constraint's there. The shape, the nerve's there, but it has no, the effect it has gone. All right. So I'm going to go back to my channel box here a sec. I can never seem to get that right here. Okay. I'm going to say, all right, it is all right. Edit, leave by type history, modify, freeze transformations. Maybe I did remember it. Let's go open the outliner. Maybe when I moved it, it put it under. Let's try putting the constraint on now. See if it makes it work any better. So I've got the constraint selected. I'm now going to Command Shift the joint I'm trying to constrain, in this case the wrist joint, and I'm going to say constrain again, orient. There's nothing much there. I want to take maintain, offset, add. Alright, now if I take this, okay, that works. Now let's see what happens if I take my arm constraint, flex the arm, take my wrist constraint, still maintains that offset, but it controls that wrist then. And then again, this is my arm constraint, yeah. If I get funky, if my elbow starts to get crazy like this, I can still go find my locator and bring it back. In this animation, I don't know what's going to happen here. Let's see what we, okay, I got to get the wrist back to 0 now. At least the values there are all set. At frame 1, it's at 0, so I'm going to set a keyframe. Frame 36, the wrist should be, I want it bent up, let's say like that. So I'll say -115. Set a keyframe. Go to 46, which is where everybody was holding. So that's just going to hold that. These 10 frames here do nothing but keep everything still. Then I'm going to go back to frame 92. 6, I guess. Now, if I can't remember, one thing I could do is I could grab the, see there's frame 95, that's where it's being set. So I can go to frame 95, take the wrist, change that back to 0, set a keyframe, and now from this movement over here we should get everything going at the same time. Okay. So, hey, how are you? There you go. Okay, that's the end of that.